Welcome to this episode of Kennedy Saves the World. I've been waiting for our next guest to fly in from the other side of the world for years now. And here he is, Trace Gallagher. He is the host of Fox News at Night. God, I hope that's the actual name of the show.
That is the actual name, Fox News at Night.
Yes.
With Trace Gallagher.
And from Los Angeles.
From Los Angeles, which is nice because it's on at 8 o'clock in the West.
Oh, that's amazing.
11 o'clock in the East, and people are still having dinner at 8 o'clock in the West.
Yes.
So at least we get better guests. It's kind of interesting. And quite frankly, stuff is still going on. So that's kind of a
that's
nice
right.
thing.
So you are after Gutfeld, and he calls himself the king of late night, but he's really on at 7.
He's on,
he's on
at 7 on the West Coast. He's on at 10 o'clock here, and but he is the king of late night, and you know he gives us a very nice lead in.
Wonderful.
And so I think it's been great, but it's kind of interesting because people always talk about it. They say, well, okay, so in the East Coast you're on what time do you tape in? I said, well, it's live.
Yeah,
it's
we don't
live
tape
across the country. There's no tape. It's news, but you're coming out of tape in Gutfeld, and so people are like, okay, well, hold on, you're in it. When they can't figure it out, which is why during the show we say the word live 174 times throughout the show because people are still like, what time do you come? They just, it's kind of hard.
You're like, I just stroll in at 2 p.m.
Right.
When I feel like throwing down a show.
Right.
I just freestyle, no script.
No, I just come in and start yammering and start talking. But it's nice because it's 8 o'clock and you're like, hey, people want to come in at 8 o'clock. When it's 11 o'clock, because my whole team is in D.C.
Oh, wow.
Show's in L.A.
I did not know that.
The show is controlled out of D.C., so the entire control room is in D.C.
Yeah.
So you're talking to people in your ear are all on the other side of the country,
Oh,
and then
amazing.
most of my team is also in D.C.
Wow. Okay, well, this is a pumpkin spice.
Is it almost Halloween?
Yes,
Nice.
exactly.
Thanksgiving.
Cheers.
Cheers. Thank you. Ooh,
It's
it's
really
very
gross.
pumpkin-y.
Yeah, it's disgusting.
That is nasty.
Yeah, that's horrible. So it's a Dunkin' Donuts like prepackaged thing.
Oh, gosh,
that I added
yeah.
something to it, and even with what I added to it to try, and it's a little triage. Still didn't work.
No,
you don't have to, and I'm fine with that.
No, but listen, it's actually kind of so bad that it's good.
It's like kitschy. It's like how people drink PBR and pretend it's
that's
substantial.
worth drinking. Remember PBR? Nobody drank it for 45 years.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden they're like, PBR is like, and then people
the
started
hipsters
drinking.
discovered it.
It's still crap.
I know.
It's been crap for 50 years, and now all of a sudden it's hot. Please, it's still terrible.
It's still bad. Exactly right.
This is better than PBR.
So I was watching you Wednesday night. I was watching the hurricane coverage late. It was 11:30 in New York, and I've got friends and relatives in Florida, and I didn't know how bad it was going to be, and I always watch anchors to try and figure out like what's going through your head, what questions do you have prepared, how much expertise are you dealing with, and you had so many good questions. Were you a weather person at one point? Like, how do you know so much about hurricanes and weather?
Because I've been covering hurricanes for 40 years.
Okay.
I mean, and we were talking about Florida last night, and I covered Hurricane Andrew in 1992 in Florida.
wow.
I didn't live there.
You were okay.
And then I moved to Florida the year after that and covered numbers of hurricanes. And now over the past 30 years, I mean, I've probably covered 24 hurricanes in Florida. So I lived there. I know the counties. I know the areas affected. And so when this thing came in and it was going after, let's see, it started going Sarasota, right? And then it started to bend a little bit. And you thought, I don't know, is this thing going to really hit land or Sarasota? It did, which gave Tampa a big break because they were expecting 15 feet of storm surge.
Yeah,
in the
I was
Tampa
watching
area.
that. So you had asked a question Wednesday night. This started out as a water event.
Right.
And you asked the meteorologist, has this changed to a wind event?
Yeah.
And that didn't even occur to me.
Right.
I didn't know that hurricanes were moody.
Yeah, and that's the whole thing. Is they say water, sometimes they're wind events. This thing was expected to be a water event
Big,
because
and
of 15 foot.
is that the most destructive?
Right, and the water is always the most destructive
Yes.
because it comes in and just wipes everything out. I remember covering, and my context for this is I remember covering the tsunami in Southeast Asia
Oh my
back in
gosh,
2004.
2004.
Yeah, 2004. And when we got there, when we got to Phuket and you go to Indonesia and you would see bodies in trees
Oh my
because
God.
the water would sweep you away. And just like tornadic activity, it's the water is one thing and so dangerous, but the debris in the water that comes ashore is lethal. So that's what happens is in tornadoes, the wind is lethal, the wind is dangerous, but when you get debris inside the wind, it is horrendous.
Wow.
So
And so what makes, just, I grew up in Oregon. Most of my life was spent in Southern California. I don't have a great understanding of that, but what makes the water so lethal?
Well, because it churns.
Is it snakes?
It's almost,
is it bacteria?
Well, there's the thing. Like the day after water today is bacteria. You worry about bacteria. You worry about power lines. You worry about, in Florida, you worry about snakes. You worry about but for the most part, it's bacteria. It's being in, we were talking to Jeanette Neshawat last night, who's a doctor, and she goes to all of these areas that have been badly hit by either war or some kind of natural disaster. And the first thing she'll say to people is stay out of the water because it's dangerous.
Yes.
I mean, you go in there, and if you've got a cut on your leg, if you get water in your eyes or something, it's really dangerous. There is so much bacteria in such a compact area that the water can be lethal days and days later.
Wow, I had no idea.
Yeah,
and
it's amazing.
Are you always surprised by people who think that they have more survival gear than they do?
I know. I mean, they're walking barefoot. They're carrying backpacks and stuff. They're like, I'm going to make this. This is going to be great. And they're walking barefoot in shorts through this nasty water. You're like, you can have whatever you want up here. You got nothing on below the waist, and you're going to get sick if you've got a cut or if you've got athlete's feet. You're going to get
that's all it takes.
Affected. Yeah, any
it's
kind
just
of
a
opening
tiny
in your
fissure
body,
in
you're
the
going to get
skin
some
anywhere.
Kind of problem.
Oh, that is a germaphobe.
Yeah,
that hurts my feelings.
Yeah, so.
That is my worst nightmare.
Stay
I mean, I'm a flip-flops in the gym kind of person.
There you go.
Yeah, I do not go, my feet do not touch any surface in the gym or hotel rooms. Yeah, I always have flip-flops.
I'm with you. I am totally with you.
Oh, you've seen a lot, man.
It's interesting because, I was watching Ron DeSantis and today, people in Florida have got to be pretty comfortable with him. I mean, he's really like, I have private industry coming in and you'd think they'd do a better job and they sucked and they're wanting to go to North Carolina because there's more money up there. And he says, so we get the government back in there. And so he's looking at things rationally and reasonably. He's not looking at government. He's not looking at FEMA. He's not looking at state. He's looking at who can do the best job for my people. And I think that's the result that he's getting is that they have, the bad news is that Florida gets a lot of hurricanes. The good news is that Florida gets a lot of hurricanes. And because of that, the response.
Yeah, they have a lot of at-bats. I was watching the aquafence that had gone up outside the Level 1 Trauma Center in Tampa, and I had never seen that before. And it's basically something that can be configured and taken down and reused 60 times. Yeah. But they have like a phenomenal success rate in keeping water out. So that's one of the aspects, like technology and innovation when it's cost effective and easy to deploy. Yeah. Like those are the kind of things, those are amazing solutions. So you don't have to rebuild everything. Thank God they didn't have as much water as they did.
Don't go anywhere. More Kennedy Saves the World right after this.
But back to the politics, we had some back and forth before the storm hit Florida between Vice President Harris and Governor DeSantis. Right. And I said yesterday on my podcast, she would literally have to walk on stormwater to make a good impression. Like she would have to do such a phenomenal job to overcome the perception of...
Yep. And I think she's embarrassed today for a couple of reasons. One is because of this whole back and forth. You had Joe Biden, you had her saying, it is absolutely irresponsible for Governor DeSantis to not answer her phone calls. Why? You have no power. She has no power to do anything. She can't send in the cavalry. He's been talking to the President of the United States, the man we believe is the President of the United States, Joe Biden.
And Joe Biden said the same thing.
And Joe Biden's
Joe Biden co-signed Governor DeSantis' statement. It's like, I've been talking to him. I get them whatever they need.
Did a great job.
I'm the guy who's still pulling the strings.
He's did a great job. And Joe Biden was asked specifically, hey, what about, the governor not answering Harris's phone calls? And he's like, you know what? The governor has been very gracious. So that undermines Kamala Harris. But the worst thing is that we found out that just outside of Asheville, North Carolina, they found a family of 11 that had been found in this mudslide, all of them dead.
Oh, no.
And so when you talk about the Democrats and the media talking misinformation and disinformation about the people who needed help, that weren't getting the help in North Carolina, just outside of Asheville, and we talked to people for days and days and days, and they kept saying, I can't get a hold of these people. I don't know where my friends are. I don't know where my family is.
Yeah.
We're not getting information. Elon Musk literally dropped these Starlinks in and said, here, at least you're going to get some communication and some contact. So he helped. And FEMA was trying to keep these helicopters on the ground because, the regulations, you can't really fly them and they're dangerous.
Threatening some of the pilots with arrest.
Right. And because, why? Because of red tape. Oh, well, we can't do that because we've got to have a clearance and you've got to have this and you've got to have air traffic control come in here and you can't do that, and said, we are trying to help people. And they were. Yeah. And so if you're the media and you're throwing this misinformation thing with absolutely no basis, and you're Kamala Harris and you've been in this battle with Ron DeSantis and this battle with all the people who are saying they need help because you're like, oh, that's misinformation, and you see this family of 11 and you know there are more that are still missing, you've got to feel like, this is the wrong time to be using the word misinformation.
Yeah, and accusing someone of being
right.
selfish when she was in New York getting yucks at Howard Stern and Stephen Colbert and The View.
Yeah,
That's liberal
exactly
hosts with liberal audiences. She's playing to her own peanut gallery, and meanwhile, people are really suffering
and still unable to answer questions, and still unable to answer even the easiest. Basic
not just
questions.
Unwilling. That's a great point. Like unable.
Unable. I mean, she's dodging questions, but she answered questions and was unable to give a proper answer. Even when she got a do-over, The View asked her, "Would you do something differently from, over the past 4 years?" And she said, "I can't think of anything." Nothing
anticipating
comes to mind.
that she would able to back clean up for herself.
Right.
Like they think that they're giving her a set so she can spike the ball.
Right.
That was not the case.
Yeah. And then she was asked on Stephen Colbert later the night. So, to clean it up, because she gave a horrible answer, and he's giving her a chance. Okay, I'm gonna. So, what would you do? Anything differently? And she again. She blew it again. She got a do-over several hours later, and her people didn't pull her aside and say, psst, psst, come here. Yeah. In case this comes up again, here's how we answer. Yeah. Here's what we say. We say, we probably do Afghanistan. We do some things differently.
But that's on her. Who she has around her, who she is listening to, that is on her.
That's right.
Because you can't force your way into her orbit. She's the one who chooses who her closest advisors are.
Right.
And she's chosen poorly.
Yeah.
I mean, this whole thing could have been an easy layup for her, and she's squandered a lot of the goodwill that she had by virtue of not being Joe Biden.
When you do Stephen Colbert and you do Call Her Daddy and you do The View and you still get stumped on all of those interviews, at least one time you get stumped, and you do Howard Stern, and we can take sound away from all of those things that you're like, oh, this was a bad answer.
Yeah.
That is poor preparation. I mean, the 60 Minutes thing, at least a journalist was asking her follow-up questions.
Yes.
The questions
I
themselves
thought
were
Bill
softballs.
Whitaker did very, very good.
But the questions themselves should have been layups for her. But he did follow-ups. The border thing, which
she's like,
was the worst
how
answer.
do you pay for it? How do you pay for it? She couldn't answer that.
Right.
It's like, okay.
Right.
But let's try this again. Right. Would you have loosened immigration as much? And that's when she should have said, no, we loosened it too much. We went too far.
Right.
We thought we were doing the right thing. And you know what? We were wrong. So much would have been forgiven. So many people would have been like, wow, I didn't expect that.
And he followed up 4 times.
Yes.
Tried to get her to say, listen, we made mistakes. We clearly made mistakes, but instead wouldn't answer it.
That is one of the smartest things you could do is level with people, even when you're wrong.
Yep.
And that's one of the biggest criticisms people have of President Trump is he doesn't admit when he's wrong. And that creates a vulnerability for him. She has the exact same thing and on some really, really serious issues that are still unreconciled for most voters.
I also think there is a little bit of nuance in there, because if you're Tim Walz, there's a way to answer the lies, the constant lies, and saying you're a knucklehead is probably not the best.
I'm just a knucklehead,
I'm just a knucklehead, right? You're like, that's not the right answer, because it wasn't a one-off. You lied again and again and again about all of these things, again and again. Records go back for years about you lying about all these things, and now you're saying, I'm a knucklehead. No, you're a chronic liar is what you are.
Exactly right. Like, no, I misspoke. It's like, no, you lied. You lied. There's a difference.
You lied. And the whole thing is, we talk about misinformation and disinformation. Of course, misinformation is getting the facts wrong. And disinformation is deliberately getting the facts wrong. And Tim Walz is now a caricature of disinformation, because these stories have been years long. He's been saying them again. And then when he gets busted, he's like, oh,
Oh, gosh. Gee willikers, look at me. Where would you rather be? Quarterbacking coverage from the studio or in the eye of the storm?
Well, I always used to say, which I was in the eye of the storm for years and years and years, that I'd always rather be on the scene. Mm-hmm. And then when you're on the scene a couple of hundred times, you're like, you know what? I think I've been on the scene plenty. Mm-hmm. I think I'd like to. I'm tired of dodging signs and so forth. I'd like to be in the studio. You know, I'd like to be in the studio. It's great to go out and get a firsthand perspective on stories that are new, that are new experiences. Hurricanes, I mean, they vary in a thing, but they're kind of, they're kind of all run from the same script, yes. And so, I mean, I think there's a healthy aspect of being in the actual hurricane. I don't mean literally healthy, but professionally, and for your perspective and your context. But there's also a good worldview that you can bring to the audience when you're anchoring it, because you know about the dirty side of the storm and you know about what this takes.
Wisdom, perspective, and also it gives you that perspective to ask people who are there questions that may not occur to them in the moment. Right. That when you're a few feet above them, you can see it, and it's so satisfying for viewers.
Yeah, and young journalists will ask me all the time. They just want to be anchors. They want to be news anchors, and I'm like, you need to be out in the field.
Yeah,
you need to go
dirty.
out and you need to experience it. So when you finally get in the anchor chair, you know what you're talking about. People will believe you. Yes. Because if you go in there at 23 years old, nobody's going to believe you. Yeah. You don't have any experience. You've never covered a hurricane. Nobody's going to believe you when you're anchoring a hurricane.
You got to earn the suit.
Yeah.
All right, Trace Gallagher, so good to talk to you.
Thank you.
I'm so happy you and I have these delightful pumpkin spice.
Can I take this with me because it's so good? I would just like to carry it around the building.
You can take the mug because the mug is so pretty. The rest of it, throw it right in the toilet.
Oh yeah, I think I'm just going to leave it here just because it looks so good on the desk, and I don't want to mess anything up. So.
The one and only Trace Gallagher. This has been Kennedy Saves the World Happy Hour along with Trace. I'm Kennedy.
Listen ad-free with a Fox News Podcast Plus subscription on Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Prime members can listen to this show ad-free on the Amazon Music app.
Oh, go ahead and leave me a review while you're there. I'd love to hear what you have to say.
You've been listening to Kennedy Saves the World on the Fox News Podcast Network.